Hi all, welcome to another session on best practices related to data engineering. In this session, we are going to be talking about something called gitignore. So as a data engineer, you'll be working on multiple projects. Uh, Sometimes it will be projects that already exist when you join an organization. So in such cases, what you will do is if the organization have a Git repository, you will clone out of that Git repository, and then so that you will have a local copy, and then you will start working in that local copy. And then as you make changes, you create branches, make the changes, and then push it into the remote so that it will be available for everyone. So we have covered the basics of Git in an earlier session. So suppose you have been assigned with a new project. So you're creating a Git repo for that new project. So in that case, one way to do that is using the GitHub desktop. Experienced developers do using command line as well. We can cover that a bit more later during the course. So for now, let's stick with the GitHub desktop. So you can come to File, New Repository, and then I'm going to name it Project 1. You can name it something like, for example, you will be working on a project on a contract hire. So you can name it contract hire or something like that. So I have the project one. Maybe I'll make it more meaningful. I'll name it contract hire. So I'm building a new project called contract hire. The purpose of this project is to facilitate a data integration pipeline that collects data from 5 different SFTP locations. You need to load the Excel file, and then you need to perform some data transformations, and then you need to load the data into Snowflake. So that is the gist of the project. So you are creating a new folder for this project, um, and it should be a Git folder so that any changes you make will be tracked by version control. So this will give you the facility, the flexibility to go back. If at all you make some mistakes, you can go back to the version that was prior to a particular new feature that you have added. Then it will give you the ability to collaborate with others in your team. You can share. Others will be able to access your code once you publish the changes to the remote server. So first of all, you are gonna create a local copy. So that is the first step. So contract hire is the project name. I'm gonna choose the location under desktop. I have algorithm. So I'm gonna create a new folder here. Contract hire. So this is going to be the folder, and the repository will be created at, okay, it is creating a folder, so I don't need to create a folder. I will just choose the top level folder, algorithm. Let me delete the folder that I have created just to avoid confusion. Okay, so it will be created under algorithm as contract hire. For now, we can just choose the defaults. So what is happening is you have created a folder within your desktop. This is called contract hire, and you can see that it has a .git attribute. So this is a directory. If you create a normal directory, it doesn't have any such file. So this means this directory is a special directory that is tracked by version control. Okay, now is this directory available for anyone else to access? No, we need to push this into the GitHub. So for that, we need to publish the repository. So you can come here, click publish repository, the repository name in the remote. It's better you keep the same. name in the local and the remote. Uh, okay, perfect. Now if I go to the algorithm and see, I can see that there is a new branch, created a branch main in algorithm contract hire. Okay, so if I click here, I can see the repository. As of now, there is nothing here. I just created the directory in my local and then I have pushed to the GitHub. So in this way, if anybody want to clone this, they just, if I share this link with you all, you will be able to access this. Okay, now what I'll do is I'll create maybe say for example a Python file. I think I'll create a folder just for demo purpose. Um, I'll be storing some data. So I create a data folder. And within the data folder, maybe I'll create some more folders like inbound, or you can even name it raw. And then something like processed archive. Okay, that's good. Now, if I come back to GitHub desktop, okay, the folders are not getting shown here. Let me put some file maybe under raw. New, I'll name it sample. Okay, so whenever I added a new file, it's automatically getting tracked. So if you come to the desktop, GitHub desktop, you can see any new changes within that uh, version tracked repository. So if I publish this, uh, if I want to publish this, if you go to the remote server in the website, if you refresh, it's not available. Only Git attributes is there. So in order to make it available here and everyone who have access to this repo, you need to publish this. So before publishing, first we need to commit it. So sample data added. We can add an optional commit message so that in future, if you want to get back to this particular point, um, it will be easier. So for that, you add a commit message, and once it is committed, it's still within your local only. If you refresh here, it's not yet available in the remote. Now, in order to make it available to remote, you need to push it to the origin. Okay, now if we come back and refresh here, you can see the data folder. So inside that, you can see the sample. So this is how Git usually works. So whenever you add new files, any changes, so now if you check here, it's clean. There is no changes. If you go to history, all the commits will be there. Initial commit, then the latest commit I have added. So if you go to initial commit, only Git attributes were there. Then if you go to sample data, so this is what happened during this commit. And if you expand it, you can see more details about it. So within sample data, there is nothing. So that's why it's not displaying anything. So let me add some actual data maybe. Maybe I'll add a text file. Documentation. So what I'll do is, so documentation, I'll save it. Now, if you go to this GitHub desktop, anytime you make changes, everything is tracked. So it will show you what are the changes since the last commit. And then if you want this to be available for others, you need to commit it and then publish it. So that's what the flow is. Now, as it is a project, I want to add a config file. So what I'll do is I'll come here and add a config file or .env file. We have a config file here, so let me just copy this. So assume that this is some configuration related to this project. So you're gonna save this in the config file, and then you need to put it in the directory. So I'll go to contract hire. You can create a folder. I'll make it easy. I'll put it as dot config all files. If you don't choose all files, it will be saved as a text file with the name .config. So you should make sure that you choose all files here. Okay, so you have added a config file, and now if you come back here, that's also a change. So any change, anytime you add any kind of file to your Git repository in your local, it will be tracked. This is what I meant when I was talking about config file. Um, um, if you directly use passwords, it will be logged into your version control. So if you commit it, then this config file and including all the password will be available for anyone who has access to this Git repo. So Git repos can be public. So if it is a public repo, then even without the link, anybody will be able to access it. So that is why we don't want Git to track changes to some files, especially config file, environment files, etc. So in such cases, we can create a special file called gitignore. So let me create a new file. Let me save it as gitignore within that directory. So contract hire is our Git directory. I'll name it as .gitignore. Okay. So now even the addition of gitignore will come here because it's a new file that you have added. Now within this gitignore, you need to mention what are the files you need to ignore. Say for example, in our case, I can create like a section called files. This is optional, just act as a comment for organization purpose. So dot config, save it. Now if you come back here in the list of changes since the last commit, that dot config is gone. If I remove it, .config is there. So this is how we can prevent changes to some files to be recorded in your Git history. So this is one example. Now some other example that we can include here is so yeah, let me give you an introduction about gitignore. So this is the notes I have. This is a text file that tells Git which files or directories to ignore. So if you don't want anything in a specific directory to be tracked, so um, for example, I create a new directory, uh, dev files, then I create something. Okay, so now if you come here, you can see that the dev files and the dev code.py. So again, it is stored as a text file. Okay, you can ignore it. So this file, this is for your local testing, something that you have created for your local testing. You don't want this to be tracked whenever you commit, whenever you push your changes to your remote and make it available for everyone. You don't want your experimental changes to be available, so you want this everything in this folder to be included into the gitignore. Then what you can do is come here, folders, and then the folder name is going to be dev. Let me use underscore maybe to make our life easier. Okay, dev files. As it is a folder, I'm just gonna add a slash c, so that one is gone. So config is gone. Dev files, any changes within the dev files, it's gone. So if you quickly commit it accidentally, you won't commit those sensitive information in config files or those not yet finalized dev information in your dev folder. So this is the purpose of gitignore. So if you don't want gitignore to be published, you can just uncheck it. That is another way. But again, every time you need to uncheck and make sure that you're only pushing whatever is needed. So that is why the safer way is you can add a gitignore and include everything that you don't want to be included in the committee. So now let me commit this. So documentation added. Okay, now if I go to the remote server and check, I'll be able to see gitignore is also added there, but that's okay. But the config file, then the dev folder, though it is part of the git directory, those files are not being tracked by git. So there is a risk if you want to go back to some changes. Um, you won't be able to do that. Say for example, if you have added something, so in here you have, if you check the history, you have 3 commits now. So say for example the documentation, in this case it's documentation, it's not something serious, but if you have assume that this documentation, it's a new feature that you have added, and after you added this feature, the things that used to work fine started breaking. It's a mess now, so you don't want that change. You want to get back to the state of this sample data added. Then you can right click and click checkout commit. So in that way you can go back to that. You can also stash changes, so maybe I'll include that in a different session. um, yeah, revert changes in commit, you can do that. um, yeah, there are a lot of things you can actually do. So that part I will cover in another session exclusively on git. But this is some basic you must know when, especially when you are creating a new project. When you clone from another project, the developers might have already added a gitignore. So one more thing you need to remember is, once something is already committed, and then if you try to add a gitignore, it may not work, because Git has already started tracking, so some history is already kept. Then you need to add additional comments in the command line to completely clean it out. So that will make your life harder. So whenever you create a file within a Git repository, think about it whether this is something you want Git to track. If you don't want that file to be tracked, add it to the gitignore. One more example file that we can add to gitignore is, if I open that contract hire here and create a new Jupyter notebook, sample notebook. So whenever you create uh, a Jupyter notebook, then if you go back to this file, automatically it will create a folder notebook checkpoints. This is another file you don't want to add to the tracking. So what you can do is, if you come here and check the changes, you can see untitled, the new notebook I have created is there, and then um, the checkpoint directory is also there. So in future, sometimes presence of this checkpoint directory will cause trouble. So you can add that to the gitignore. So what you can do is here dot I notebook checkpoints. I think that's the name. Let me see. Yeah, that's gone. Also, whenever you create a notebook, if it is named as untitled, that means it's not yet finalized. So you can even do something like, so currently untitled is being tracked. So what I can do is I can even add something like, maybe I'll do it under the file section. Um, Anything that starts with untitled, I don't want it to be tracked. Now that's also gone. So now I have finalized everything. So um, I'm struggling to find a name. Final notebook 1. So now everything is finalized. I have added so much code. Now everything is finalized. So I rename it. Once I rename it, if I come back and check here, now I can see it. So final notebook 1 added. Commit. I'll add one more notebook. So this one will still be called untitled. I'll just add something here. So if you come back here, that notebook, even though I have added it within a Git directory, it's still not being tracked. Now if I push the changes, and if I go to the remote and refresh, I can see the final notebook, that commit, it's been reflected in the remote, but that untitled notebook or the IPy notebook checkpoint directory, it's not added. The config file is not there. Then I have ignored one more, dev files. So in this way, gitignore is a text file in summary where you can include the files or directories that you don't want to be tracked. So in this way, when you quickly commit something, you don't have to check and hear all the changes and uncheck those changes that you don't want to commit. If it is there in the gitignore direct file, it will automatically not be tracked. So that is one best practice you should be aware of as a data engineer when you use GitHub for your version control. That's everything for this uh, session, and thank you.